A clip can now have the property to be a loop clip. So what we do is we select the clip and go to the in-out properties box, and here you see the loop off, on, and when we select it and turn it on, we go back to the highlights tab and you'll see that the icon has changed to include an arrow to denote that it actually will play back in a loop mode. And so be aware that this only works as a clip playback and does not currently work in playlists as far as looping within a playlist. But the idea here is that you don't have to put a clip into a playlist first and turn on the loop property of the playlist to get that clip to actually loop. So this is just kind of a nice shortcut. Another feature is the ability to display either duration or the mark-in time code right below the thumbnail on each clip. So if we go to the config and under the user tab near the bottom, you can see that there's a clip timecode display choice, and you can choose duration or mark in. So if I select mark in, when we go back to the highlight, you can see the display of the timecode of the mark in when the clip was created. And then if we go back over here, we can see that you still have the duration displayed on the surface. But if we want to go back and change that, we can just go back and change duration, look at the clip again, and you see the duration of the clip below the thumbnail. So one of the things that you may have just seen in that config also under the user tab is going to be TBar Controls program only, yes or no selection. And this is very important for operators who work in program preview mode all of the time. And they always want control of the TBar anytime, even if they are in preview mode. If I want to use the feature to name each angle separately, we can select separate angle names. And this way each individual angle will get its own name. When I create a highlight and I want to name all of the angles the same name, I just select it with the blue band, and I'm going to name this one Olaf All. After I hit enter, it enters the name for every angle. So when I change the angle, you can see that all of the angles are named Olaf All. So if I double tap the clip and cue it, then I can actually rename this particular angle. So I'm going to name this one Olaf A. But when I go to B, it says Olaf All, which was the label that we gave it beforehand. Implemented in this version of software is single mark but gang recue. This is the ability to have a single mark added to one record channel, but both channels can be recued to the same cue. So if I add mark and I select both record channels and cue back to one mark, it actually takes both channels back to that single mark location. It's a very nice feature. It's important to point out that our Dino Zoom tool now works with all formats of recorded sources. So if it's a standard HD camera, a 6x super slow motion, a 3x 1080p, or even the 4K, you can use pan and zoom in this area. If pan and zoom is not enabled on the Summit side for this channel of playout, then the Dino Zoom tool would actually say monitor. And the monitor tool would show you this. It's video with audio choices. You can adjust your volume, you can choose which pair of audio to select, and this is very handy if you're going to be editing playlists. A slightly new way to change the mix effect in a playlist, it's a pretty slick interface. Now when we go to the mix effect tab, it pops open a window and gives us the choices from our mix effects. So we can just select one by touching it and then hit OK. And another option is to select it and then just double tap. And when you double tap, it's the same as applying it or hitting OK. So it's very nice to choose from. A lot of customer requests were they couldn't remember what mix effect they had set up in the configuration, and it would be nice to choose from a list of them. So we've delivered that. And the same thing goes for all ME. We can make the selection, choose from here. I want all of them to be ME3, and it applies to all of them. It's a very nice interface. One of the things you may have noticed is that we now have wipes. We can choose from a wipe. So if we go to our configuration setup, we can see what that looks like under the effects tab. So here we get to choose from a wipe, a dissolve or matte or a wipe, and I'm going to set which one it is. So we can choose from two that are loaded currently. So which way do we want the wipe to go? Bar to left. If I select that, then I can choose the reverse. And if I did that, it says bar to right. Same thing if I choose bar to the bottom. If I did the reverse, it would change it to bar to top. We can also choose from different levels of softness: high, none, low, medium. And same thing for the border width. We can choose the different sizes. And we can choose from a color palette for what color you want your bar. In this case, I've chosen red. Currently, there are only two wipe choices: left to right, top to bottom, or the reverse of those. But we really are looking for feedback that we can choose from all of the SMPTE wipes to implement, but it's the feedback that will determine which ones will get implemented next. Split audio editing. Internally, we call it L-cuts at Grass Valley, but this has been on the request list for quite a while, and we finally accomplished it. But it's really well implemented, even better than our competitors, and here's why. When I select a clip that I want to do split auto editing with, I can queue it up and jog into the content. And when I shift trim, you can see some white arrows showing the clip that you're working with. And then if you notice on the right hand side, there are a couple different colors. The light green is where you are currently. The faded green is the material that has the original ins and out points. And then a dark green, which is the guard band material. You'll also notice that you have trim video and trim audio as choices to select. So I'm going to select trim video. When I choose where I want my video to end, let's say I'm going to say right here, and I hit out on the controller, you'll see on the right hand side the split. So there's new video coming in from the second clip that extends to the right hand side, and the darker is the original audio from the first clip. And your audio will then continue for the duration of the original clip. But the video is new, and that's also shown by this arrow showing that here in this case 2 seconds 6 frames is going to be pulled up from this second clip. For this next exercise, I'm going to scroll down to the third clip, and I'm going to do an audio trim. So again, shift trim, that gives me the white arrows, and then I'm going to select trim audio on the controller, and then I'm going to jog to this particular location to start here, and I say in. What you get as a result on the right hand side is that we're going to continue the audio for another 1 second 10 frames into the third clip. So the video will be the same, but the audio will extend from the second clip into the third clip. To clear the trim, let's say I made a mistake and I really don't want to do an audio edit here, I can just select the clip, go to the top of it by double tapping, shift trim again, and by having either the trim video or the trim audio selected, when I choose my endpoint as the original endpoint, it'll clear the split audio edit. Another nice feature is that when I select a clip and go to shift trim mode, I can utilize the arrow keys on the Dyno controller to navigate to the different edit decisions that I've made. And I can update these. You can see here just by clicking on the arrow keys with the controller, I have easy access to the different points where those edit decisions were made. Now perhaps I went into trim mode and I don't want to make any changes and I want to escape. Simply hit shift trim once again. One more thing to note about playlists is that the box here on the left hand side still shows the normal information as far as duration, the countdown for the clip, but once we go into the shift trim mode, you'll see the change of information very specific to the trim editing that we plan to do. So you can see duration, the countdown for that clip, and the video duration, so where that information is actually different. Something that I wanted to point out and not forget is that this also extends to the power screen. So as well as the ME choices that we want to make, or if we're going to do some split editing, we can go into shift trim mode and you actually see the information on the screen. So really nice that this is expanded into the power screen and not just on the dyno controller. Some important network streaming settings that we want to make sure we have set to avoid flooding the network with unnecessary live network streaming. So for our recorder channels, we want to make sure that we have no network streaming turned on. Only for the player channels would we turn that on, and only for a player channel that we're actually going to access. In most cases, if I'm going to use pan and zoom, then I will not have my channel 4 live streaming turned on. I'm only going to use the channel 3 or the P1 side. In the case that I would be using the monitoring tool, then I would have channel 3 and channel 4 enabled for live network streaming so that I can actually monitor those channels. So the idea is, according to our engineering team, is that we want to be good network citizens and not just have channels spewing network data out on the system, and it's unnecessary. So even here, the fact that 8 megabits for streaming is pretty high level. It's very unnecessary. 4 is probably ideal for the dyno. Very important to point out the significance that we do not record proxy files at the same time that we're doing live network streaming. So in a lot of cases where you have a Strata system up and running and utilizing pan and zoom at the same time, be aware that recording of proxy files is not supported. Also different in this build, that's different from previous builds, is the fact that Dyno now acknowledges GPI triggers for off-speed clips that are loaded into a playlist. So when we go to the GPI settings, when we have a play trigger set up for a specific channel, channel 3 here for example, we might have a 6x super slow-mo clip in that playlist and it's going to play back at 17%. Dyno now acknowledges that it would play at 17%. Prior builds, it would not acknowledge what the clip speed was in a playlist, so it would just play it back at 100%. One more thing under System tab for multicast, this is where you do your IP-based settings for custom multicast configurations, and I want to make you aware that changes to these settings can greatly impact the performance of live streaming for pan and zoom or the monitoring tool, and you may not be able to see those features or utilize them as they were designed. So make note to these settings and try to keep them as they were when the product was delivered to you. For more information, please access our website. There you'll find links to documentation, forum groups, and videos.